Today I'd like to talk about a book that is very close to me, very near and dear to me, and that is The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoyevsky. Um, this book got me through a very tumultuous time in my life. This book, along with Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. Now they're both extremely large, girthy books. They're both over 1,000 pages. I think War and Peace is around like 1,200 pages. I read them. I read them both in the winter time, and I would recommend reading Russian novels during the winter. I think that might be that's a must, I would say. When winter rolls around, you should be reading Russian novels. But The Brothers Karamazov is my favorite type of novel because it's very philosophical, but the way that the philosophy is presented to you is not through treatises or any type of in-depth, how do I say this? I suppose just there are no philosophical treatises. It's told to you through a story, so you have to suss it out, you know. And I'm gonna try to describe some of the plot to you and some of the ideas and give you my take on it. There's a biplane flying above my house right now. You can probably hear it. I've never seen this plane before. That's really something. That's pretty cool. I like that. Anyway. So The Brothers Karamazov is about a highly dysfunctional family. Mainly because of the father of the family, the elder Karamazov. Now, the elder Karamazov is a sort of a grifter. Not a grifter, but somebody that just sort of takes advantage of people and will use whatever scumbag means necessary to sort of sponge his way through life. He marries into a wealthy family, and that's in Russia at the time. That was a way for a man to actually make money, was through a dowry, through marriage. So you would marry into a wealthy family as maybe a less than wealthy or high status individual, and you could gain wealth that way through the dowry being estates and land and property. So he marries into a wealthy family and more or less drives his wife to suicide through his lechery. Lechery, is that a word? His this guy's sleeping around. He's a drunk. He's just a horrible person, really, is what it boils down to. But so he goes through his first wife, and he bears his first son, Dmitri. And Dmitri, out of the three brothers, is probably the closest to his father. Dmitri is he's a handsome young soldier that is driven by his desires, much like his father. So he likes sex, he likes drunken parties, and he can't keep a hold of his money, and which becomes a point of contention between him and his father, because Dmitri can't seem to hold on to his funds. He's always spending them on frivolous activities, but and borrowing money and not holding on to it, which is not very good. But his father has estates and has money, but Dmitri feels that he hasn't received what was owed to him from his father, and this is a point of argument between the two. He represents the baser nature of humanity. His name, Dmitri, is the masculine form of the word Demeter. And if you know who Demeter is, the god or the goddess of the earth in the Greek. So, his desires, what drives him are things of this world, let's say. How about? And another point of contention between Dmitri and his father is his love for this woman, well, the people in the 50s might call her an operator. Okay, she's sort of a whore. Okay, to put it bluntly, she's a bit of a whore. And her name is Grushenka. Grushenka is not even that attractive of a woman. She is a middling woman. She's I believe Dostoyevsky describes her as being a woman that looks good, basically in her 20s, but you can tell as soon as she gets mid to late 20s, those looks are going to go down, and the redeeming qualities are few with this woman, at least in the beginning. But the point of contention between Dmitri and his father are money and Grushenka. Grushenka has been sort of teasing around the elder Karamazov, teasing in the way that pretending that she will marry him, and but he knows that she's not attracted to him. He's simply trying to woo her over with the promise of funds, with money. But the elder Karamazov, it's very unlikely that he actually loves Grushenka. It's hard to say if the elder Karamazov truly loves anybody. Okay, the closest I would say would be his youngest son Alyosha, which we'll talk about in a second. But I want to keep talking about Grushenka a little bit. Grushenka is teasing both the elder Karamazov and Dmitri. And Dmitri is extremely afraid that she will go ahead and marry his father, even though he is in love with Grushenka. And so he's paranoid and obsessed with Grushenka. And she's really just playing both sides. Grushenka will end up falling in love with Dmitri by the end of it. So, and I believe she says that she never wanted to have anything to do with the elder Karamazov in the first place, but this is a little unclear. It's a little unclear to me, anyway. Maybe somebody smarter can tell me. All right, it's been a while since I've read the book, and it's a long book, so I'm sure I'll forget some details here. So that's the dichotomy between the elder Karamazov and the oldest brother, Dmitri. By the way, before I get off Grushenka in Russian means little pear. which is a reference to Saint Augustine when he steals the pears from his neighbor with his buddies. It sort of is an allegory for original sin and sinning, not for the pleasure of the pear even, but for the pleasure of the sin itself. Okay, which I think is what the relationship between the elder Karamazov and Grushenka is. It's not. It may not be the case that he really wants Grushenka. It may be the case that he wants to spite Dmitri, or that he wants to just have sex and fulfill his desires through Grushenka, or it may be all of the above. Okay, but either way, sin for sin's sake, in a way. All right. Now his second wife, after his first wife dies, his second wife, Dmitri, is living with, essentially outside of his father's house. He's raised by the elder Karamazov's butler, essentially. So, goes to show what kind of a father this is, if the rest of it wasn't enough, right? He marries another woman, and she produces the next two brothers. The middle child being Ivan, and Ivan represents the intellectual man, the man of intellect. His value is within his mind and his ability to rationalize and be a rational creature. And Ivan, I'm trying to think of how to say this. Their mother, this second wife, ends up dying as well, and after producing Ivan and Alyosha. This is tough to think of the best way to describe this, but Ivan and Alyosha are sent abroad to another family, to be raised essentially by another family, because the elder Karamazov has nothing to do with his children. He's a deadbeat. So, but Ivan clearly has a grudge against his dad, and doesn't like taking charity off of people, the people that wanted to raise him in their house. They were raised by a good people and sent to college and got a good education, and Ivan performed very well academically, and he ends up moving out on his own very quickly and starting a business where he writes for the papers in was it Petersburg? It might have been St. Petersburg or Moscow. I'm not entirely sure. This takes place in a small town in Russia, but the characters a lot of the time are abroad, but for the occasion of the book come back together. So Ivan Ivan is the intellectual. He's through his intellect, he's become an atheist, and he's become disconnected and disconcerted with the world in a way, to a point where he's on the verge of nihilism. And in a chapter that I will recount later, he goes into detail about some of the things that he's seen and the things that he's heard about the brutality and the cruelness of the world that they live in, and how he's sort of lost hope in humanity. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk about Alyosha. Alyosha is the youngest son, and he is not the smartest, but he's not the dumbest either. And his driving faculty is the spirit of Christ. In Dostoyevsky novels, there are many times where there will be a Christ figure within the novel, and Alyosha is our Christ figure in this novel. So Alyosha has this sort of, when you read about him, he has this sort of halo effect. He has this amazing aura because he's able to love everybody regardless of the people that they are. Okay? And this comes very naturally to Alyosha. It's not that he has to try to love anybody. It's that he just does. That's a problem that I have with many Christians, is that that their religion teaches them to love, and a decent portion of the Christians that I've come across, the love element is stripped entirely from, and what it becomes is all about doctrine and rationality. And what does rationality have to do with faith and love? I don't know. Okay, doctrinal issues I'm sure are plenty important, but if it means sacrificing the Spirit of Christ to get there, to be sure about your whatever doctrinal, Calvinist, Armenian, Catholic, whatever, I don't know all these sects, okay, so don't get mad at me if, please. I don't know, that's a rabbit hole. I won't get too far deep down it, but Alyosha is probably the best example of a true Christian that you can, besides Christ, of course, okay, because he's not perfect. There are times when he is tempted by atheism, which the best chapter in the book, I'll just cut right to it, is a part between Alyosha and Ivan, where they meet in a coffee shop, and Ivan is a sort of amateur poet, and he writes stories and comes up with these stories, and one of them was the story of the Grand Inquisitor. Now, the Grand Inquisitor chapter is my favorite, and I'm sure it's a lot of your guys' favorite as well, because there's a whole lot of issues being addressed in it. And it's the idea of, it confronts a lot of ideas of what the church has become, the Catholic Church. Dostoyevsky is a big backer of the Orthodox Church, the Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox Church. And they address some of the issues within Catholicism. It seems like Ivan levels the claim to the Pope, that the Pope is the version of Christ that fell to Satan's temptation to rule the world. Very interesting. But when they meet, Ivan discusses many atrocities within what he's studied and within what he's seen, and says that he's sort of unable to hold on to faith in humanity, and the only things really keeping him connected to the world are the way that Dostoyevsky writes it is so fantastic. Where he's talking about like the sort of the dew on the leaves and like this sort of shining, glowing nature, which he does in multiple parts where the sun is sort of shining and the sun rays are hitting a character. And what I think that represents is God's light, right? Like in Plato, how the form of the good is compared to the sun. I think that's what that is. I think that's supposed to be the light of God shining on somebody, and sort of filling them with this love, and this love of life. And this happens to Alyosha when he's very young. He has a flashback to his mother, who is crying, and in some sort of breakdown, his mother had some issues, and but she held him up to so the sort of pictures of Jesus and Mary and whatnot. Many Russians would have in Orthodox people. I don't know much about Orthodoxy, so don't get on me there. But you'll have these sort of shrines in people's houses. That's what it seems like to me, as coming from a Protestant background, growing up in a Protestant background. They seem like little shrines. Okay, I know that's not what they would be called, but I'm blanking on what the actual term is. Okay, bear with me. So she's holding him up, and he remembers very distinctly. He doesn't remember anything his mother is saying or what was really going on, but he remembers the light, the sort of beams hitting him, and just feeling sort of just feeling okay, and it's an interesting line that happens there. I'd have to go back and read it, but it is memorable. But this happens in multiple times in the book to characters, where this sort of God shines his rays of light on people. But they're talking, and Ivan is telling Alyosha that he's sort of lost faith in humanity because he's heard these stories about soldiers breaking into people's houses and sort of torturing children, making a baby laugh, and as soon as it laughs, is shooting it, like blowing its head off, or just the atrocities, or stories of this little girl that was horribly mistreated by her parents and locked in, like shit smeared on her, and locked in an outhouse or something like that, and she dies. Just some awful stuff that he's seen and that he's experienced, and he's become very, very disconnected and very loveless towards the world. So what this is all of these characters love something. Okay, Dmitri loves the things of this world. He loves sex, pleasures. His love is of a lower level. Okay, this should be starting to sound familiar if you've read Plato's Republic. And then there's Ivan. He values rationality. He values the way things are versus the way things ought to be. He values his intellect and rationality, right? But he doesn't have the love that Alyosha has, which is the higher love, the love for God, the love for his fellow man. And there are times where where Alyosha is tempted, and he is close to turning his back on the faith. I suppose I should probably tell you a little bit about what Alyosha does after his schooling. I went off on a tangent there. I don't have any notes. I'm just going off the fly here, so I'm sorry if this is not very coherent. But after Alyosha leaves leaves his schooling. He goes and studies in a monastery. He becomes a novice. It's like a journeyman to become a priest, I suppose. What would you call that? I can't remember. But he studies under this man named Father Zosima, and he's our other Christ-like figure. Father Zosima has an interesting past. He was in the army and he mistreated people, and was a sort of he was a rambunctious type of fellow. He was a bit of a rapscallion, and but he had this good example of his brother. His brother was a sort of atheistic guy as well, but he got very sick and was dying. And right before his death, he goes into this sort of mania, where his mind is very much changed. He starts wanting to go to church. He starts praying. He starts. He becomes a Christ-like figure in a Dostoyevsky novel, and he sees the rays of light, and they're shining on him, and he imparts this sort of knowledge and says that we must love everybody to Zosima when he's a young man, and he ends up dying, and that impression was always left on Zosima. Well, anyway, Zosima ends up getting himself into some trouble later in life when he's a soldier, and he challenges somebody to a duel. And before that happens, he ends up hurting one of his friends, and at some point within this, an extreme moment of clarity, almost a road to Damascus, happens to him, where his mind is sort of just, he understands what's going on. He understands what love is, and he's convicted. So he apologizes to his friend that he hit, and he goes to this duel and lets the man fire, and he I can't remember if he throws the pistol or if he shoots off, and he just won't. He's not having the duel, and he says, "Well, look, I mean, I was wrong. I'm sorry that I think he was hitting on the man's wife or something like that." And he apologizes for his actions and changes his ways. And then from there he becomes a priest. So Zosima is an interesting character. And he's gone through, he travels across Russia evangelizing to people. But he's almost on a saint-like level, but he's devoid of a lot of the church dogmas that the church has. There's another character, I forget his name, that is all about the fasting constantly, and I only fast on bread. I fast on bread and water for months and months, and I'm constantly praying, and I fall asleep while I'm praying, and this guy, he's just all about the works, right? All about that works mentality. But he has no love. He comes to the congregation, the parish that he's in, and is constantly just shaming people and saying that he's far holier than thou. And that Zosima guy, Zosima lives in a little hut, so does this other guy. They live sort of separated from the main parish. And this guy comes in and is like, that Zosima, he's getting candies, he's getting sweets delivered to him from some women, and spreading rumors about Zosima and saying that he's a total heathen. So lambasting him for just stupid things. So he's devoid of love. And he's also crazy too. He comes into the congregation and says that he sees demons all over within the within the congregation that, oh, I came in there and I saw the demons, and I slammed the door on the I was slamming the door on the tail of the demons. I was just guy thinks he thinks he's Doom Guy, right? This guy's retarded though. Okay? He's devoid of love. What Zosima has is love, and he talks to people. He goes out, and interacts with the poor and prays for people, and that's actually how the beginning of the book starts. Is the family comes to visit Zosima, Dmitri and the elder Karamazov, and of course the elder Karamazov shows up pissed drunk and makes a fool of himself, and is just an embarrassment, and ends up sort of almost throwing hands with his son, to which Zosima does this very enigmatic gesture where he bows in front of Dmitri. He gets on his knees and bows in front of him, and it's a very strange, I'm not sure that I understand what's going on there fully, but I think when they asked him about it, he said, well, I can just tell that he's bound for hardships in his life. How did I get there? Were we talking about Alyosha? So Alyosha studies under Zosima, and Zosima ends up, he's very ill and at the end of his life, and ends up dying. But before he dies, he tells Alyosha that he must venture out and leave the monastery. To which Alyosha is very confused. He doesn't understand the command. He's like, well, why do I have to leave the monastery? You know, I was just getting started here. And it's because Zosima understands that Alyosha's purpose in his home is not within the confinement of the monastery. It's out in the world to spread the word to the nations. And this is very symbolic, right? That's what Christ told the disciples to do. But the Grand Inquisitor is a very philosophically interesting chapter, where the Alyosha and Ivan meet, and it's rationality versus love, and he tells the story. Ivan tells the story of the Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor is a story about if Christ returned during the Spanish Inquisition. So people are getting burnt at the stake. It's at the height of church legalism. And the Grand Inquisitor sees Christ come along and uniting the people, and sort of having this Hosanna moment, right, where the people are following him and praising him, and everybody's sort of united. And the Grand Inquisitor arrests Jesus, and it's a debate between this Grand Inquisitor and Jesus. And Jesus says no lines during this. He says nothing. But the Grand Inquisitor just tells him that he completely messed up by not setting up his kingdom on earth. Said if you would have just given the people bread, they would have followed you. You know, I sound stupid. the challenges, the temptations that the devil gave Christ, he's grilling Christ on these challenges that are perceived as failures from the Grand Inquisitor's point of view, and he says, "What I do is I fulfill the need that people have because you're gone. And if you would have stayed, and if you would have accepted this, you know, why didn't you do that? Essentially, you know, we can't have this. You're what you're doing is you're coming here and you're starting disorder. This is not going to work. What we need is to give the people bread and circuses and the beast with the cup that says mystery on it. They need mystery. They need things to like be puzzled with, and they need to be controlled. Right. But he says to Jesus, "Look, we can't have you here, and we set up here on earth, and we can't have you messing up our regime. So in the morning we're going to have you burned at the stake." And Jesus' reply is not an argument, but a kiss. Jesus kisses the Grand Inquisitor, and the Grand Inquisitor is taken aback. He doesn't know what to say. He's like, "Look, I don't know what just happened, but you need to leave." So he kicks out Jesus, and Alyosha's like, "Whoa, what is this story about?" It seems like you're saying that that the Catholic Church is essentially the Laodicean church, if you know what that is. It's the woman riding the beast in Revelation, I think. I think that's in Revelation. But they argue a bit, and they talk about whether or not this world is worth being in, and whether or not Ivan has... Ivan essentially is the Grand Inquisitor in this conversation. He tells all these reasons why Alyosha should lose his faith in humanity, and brings up all these horrible things about the world, and says, "Well, look, from my point of view, if there is no God, then all things are permitted." And Alyosha's response is not an argument. Alyosha's response, you guessed it, is a kiss. So Alyosha, and Ivan is like jokingly, he's like, you can't do that, you know? What does he say? He says, that's plagiarism, basically. He's like, you took that from my story. Because if Ivan's able to come up with this, he understands what's happening there, that this sort of love is as an answer to rationality, because there are just places that rationality can get you that may have nothing to do with being good or being morally virtuous. But it's not just about being morally virtuous, okay? Because that's exactly what the I wish I could remember the priest's name, the legalist. That's exactly what they're all about. Moral virtue. They're all about virtues. They're not so much about love. And Alyosha is all about love. So he's a very good exemplar of Christ. I realize that I've hardly gotten into the plot of the story and what's going on. I'll briefly run through it. It's a really long book, and this is a really long video, so I understand if you didn't make it this far, but I'll breeze through the last part here. So Dmitri has a rivalry with his father. You know what? I can't even. We're 38 minutes in. I can't explain the rest of it. I can't. So I'll have to make a part 2 to this if anybody likes this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. Before I end it, I will say that Alyosha is an amazing character that does sort of renew your faith in humanity, even though he is a fictional character. But you can, with a lot of these characters, you can see people within them. We all know a Dmitri, and we all know an Ivan. I would say that I am close to being Ivan sometimes, and I'm close to being Dmitri as well. But what I want to be is Alyosha, okay? They're Plato's myth of the metals. It's Dmitri is bronze, Alyosha is silver, which is the spiritual instead of the thumatic man, or the thumos, the spirited. and then there's the gold, which is rationality. But in Dostoyevsky's philosophy, the spiritual reigns supreme to rationality. But we all know people that are like this, and we see ourselves within these characters. You know, you read the things that Ivan says, and you can't help but be like, yeah, I mean, that's pretty tough stuff. It's hard to deal with that reality. But then you see Alyosha, and it gives me hope for Christians, and I would say he's one of my favorites. Besides my parents, my Uncle Tony, my grandma, a whole lot of other Christians are nothing but philosophers. But that's getting a little edgy, and I probably shouldn't keep going with that. But please read The Brothers Karamazov.